All right, today we're going to tackle a big one, a condition that's really complex and, honestly, pretty misunderstood. We're talking about antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD for short.
So let me ask you something. Can you imagine going through your day, making choices, interacting with people, but without that little voice inside that tells you when you've done something wrong? That feeling of guilt or remorse? It's a tough thing to picture, right? Well, that question gets right to the heart of what we're exploring today, because that's a core feature of ASPD. Okay, so what does that actually mean in plain English? The most important words here are lifelong pattern. This isn't just someone having a bad week or a teenager going through a rebellious phase. Nope. We're talking about a really deep-seated way of behaving that starts super early in life and just keeps going, causing huge problems everywhere. School, work, relationships, you name it. Now, this next part is super important because a lot of people get this confused. You've probably heard ASPD and psychopath thrown around like they're the same thing, right? Well, they're not. Here's a simple way to think about it. ASPD is all about the behavior, what a person actually does, things we can see. Psychopathy, on the other hand, is about what's going on inside, or maybe what's not going on. We're talking a total lack of empathy and inability to feel guilt. So you could say that psychopathy is a much more severe version of ASPD.
All right, so just how common is this? And what are the actual red flags, the signs to look out for? Let's dive right into the specifics. Now, at first glance, 2 to 5% might not sound like a lot, but think about it. That means as many as 1 out of every 20 people could fit the diagnosis for ASPD at some point. That's actually a pretty big number when you stop and think about it. And get this, there's a huge difference between men and women. Men are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with ASPD. And that's not just a one-off finding. It's something researchers see again and again. Okay, so remember that 1 in 20 number for the general population? Now hold that thought and look at this. In prisons, that number just explodes. Some studies have found that up to 80%, 80% of incarcerated men meet the criteria for ASPD. It just goes to show you how incredibly strong the link is between this disorder and the criminal justice system. So we've talked numbers, but what does this actually look like day to day? Well, thanks to a huge survey, we can get a really clear picture, starting with the signs that pop up when someone is just a kid. These early signs in childhood, they often get a label called conduct disorder. And you can see how common things like stealing are. But it's not just a one-time thing. We're talking about a consistent pattern of just breaking all the rules and not caring who gets hurt. Things like bullying, constant lying, always skipping school, and even outright cruelty to other people. And as these kids grow up, the behaviors don't just continue. They get worse. They escalate. Consistent irresponsibility sounds a bit clinical, but what it really means is they can't hold down a job, they don't pay their bills. Then you have repeated illegal acts, being aggressive and irritable all the time, a total disregard for safety, and the thing that ties it all together, a complete, almost chilling lack of remorse for any of it. So this all begs the million-dollar question. Where does this even come from? Is it something people are born with, or is it something that happens to them? The classic nature versus nurture debate. And as you're about to see, the answer is, well, it's a messy mix of both. Let's start with nature, the biological side of things. Genetics are a huge piece of the puzzle. Twin studies suggest that more than half the risk is actually inherited. And it's not just genes. There are actual physical differences in the brain. Brain scans show that folks with ASPD often have less gray matter in their prefrontal cortex. Think of the prefrontal cortex as the CEO of your brain. It's in charge of judgment, decision-making, and hitting the brakes on bad impulses. So if that part is underdeveloped, you can see how things go wrong. Throw in some wonky brain chemistry, and you've got a biological recipe for trouble. But biology is definitely not the whole story. The nurture side, a person's environment, is just as important. A really common theme you see is a childhood filled with neglect, abuse, or just plain chaotic parenting. And then there's the social angle. You know the saying, birds of a feather flock together? Well, troubled kids tend to find other troubled kids, and they end up in this echo chamber where they actually reinforce each other's bad behavior. To make matters worse, sometimes the parents have their own history of ASPD or similar problems, which just creates this vicious cycle that's incredibly hard to break. Okay, so we've covered what ASPD is and where it might come from. So what does it look like as a person goes through life? Let's take a look at the timeline. You can really see a clear progression here. The very first signs can show up before a kid even hits double digits. Then, criminal behavior tends to hit its peak in the late teens and early 20s. By the time someone's in their late 20s or early 30s, the disorder is in full swing. But here's something interesting. There can be a turning point for some people. Right around age 35, things can start to improve, especially the really overt criminal stuff. But improvement doesn't mean the problems go away. This quote just says it all. While the antisocial individual might age out of crime, they age into the healthcare system. It's such a powerful way to put it. The criminal behavior might fade, but the story is far from over. All those years of recklessness and not taking care of themselves, they take a massive toll. So let's break down what those lasting consequences really are, because they touch pretty much every part of a person's life. Yeah, even for the people who get better, the damage is often already done. The ghost of their past behavior creates this whole lifetime of struggle. We're talking about never being able to hold down a job, being stuck in poverty, and a trail of broken relationships. On top of that, they have way higher rates of substance abuse and, really tragically, a much higher risk of dying young from pretty much everything: accidents, suicide, and even natural causes. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that ASPD isn't just about someone being a bad person. It's a deeply complex disorder with roots in both our biology and our childhood, and it casts this incredibly long shadow over a person's entire life. And that leaves us with a really tough question to chew on, doesn't it? If a disorder has roots this deep in our brains and our genes and our childhoods, what does that mean for things like personal responsibility? It makes you think differently about our justice system and what it would really take to rehabilitate someone. There are no easy answers here. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.